Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Welcome to the Worry-Free Retirement with Tony Walker. And now, the host of the Worry-Free Retirement, John Ramsey.
Hello and welcome to the Worry-Free Retirement, the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money. With us right now is none other than the author and creator himself, Senior Market Advisor Magazine's finalist for Advisor of the Year, Tony Walker. Tony, welcome to another show. I'm looking forward to this one, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit if you don't mind, okay?
Oh, yeah.
We got off the last show and we were talking about this great run of weather we're having, and you mentioned roasting marshmallows. Okay, and then you compared marshmallows with you had a little money analogy comparison. You were talking about the different size of marshmallows. I didn't even know there were two different sizes, but you told me that.
Until recently, we went marshmallow hunting. It's kind of fun.
So anyway, and then that got me thinking even further because you mentioned the Federal Reserve. And I have to be honest with you, Tony, I don't understand the Federal Reserve. I know they want to keep this policy of keeping interest rates low. I know it affects the economy somehow because everyone talks about the Federal Reserve. And I wanted to ask you, what does the Federal Reserve mean to me and to our viewers and their worry-free retirement?
Well, I think the philosophy behind the worry-free retirement is try to control the things we have control over. And I think what we see is with the Federal Reserve's policies, and I'm going to show you an illustration here in a minute, try to break this down in layman's terms, but with the Federal Reserve's policies and why it creates so much inflation and affects our purchasing power. And I made that comment after the show, John. I said, you know, this big old marshmallow over time is getting smaller and smaller. Now, notice something is getting bigger, but this will affect purchasing power too. If you notice the toilet paper holders, the diameter has gotten bigger. You probably have noticed that. See, I pay attention to stuff like this.
But now that you say that,
think about that. Now, why would that be bigger?
It would make less toilet paper that they have to spend money on. Yeah, there you go. Makes
Coffee cans are getting smaller. So as you see inflation hitting, what happens is it does affect your pocketbook. Now, the retail environment is good at disguising that, and they're thinking, hey, we can't put a pound of coffee out here. We'll change the size of the can, or we'll make the toilet paper thing bigger so that there's less paper on there. But nevertheless, these Fed policies have a disastrous effect long-term on the dollar. So what I thought I would do for the audience, as best I can, because it does kind of get complicated. All this gets complicated. But I'm going to walk over to the Elmo, John, and kind of walk people through, if you're all right with this. This will be some fun here. We're going to walk people through a little bit about the Fed here, and we can cut to the Elmo, folks. We'll come over here on the Elmo. We up on the Elmo yet? Ready to go? There we go. Great. So basically, folks, you have to understand that the Federal Reserve, the whole system of monetary policy, was actually started in 1913. And that was the same year, ironically, that our national federal income tax started. So it's kind of interesting that those two things started. Now, first of all, the Federal Reserve is not really a federal program. It was something that was legislated in, it was created, but it really supports the banking institutions, mainly the large banks. And that's why when we had the crash 7 or 8 years ago and these banks were all failing, the big banks, I'm talking the big ones, and remember the government stepped in and said we can't let them fail because it'll affect everybody, it'll affect Joe Lunchbox and everybody else. This has happened before, and it's probably going to at some point happen again, because you're going to see in a minute when we look at the Federal Reserve and how we create money, it's kind of creating stuff out of thin air. So let me go to the Elmo here and kind of draw this out for you. What I'm going to do, we're going to start with, we'll just imagine this box here represents the U.S. Treasury, okay? If you'll notice something, the U.S. Treasury, if you, in your withholding, when you get a check, John, and there's taxes taken out of that, we'll just call it federal taxes, that goes to the Treasury. And different estimates say different things, but anywhere from 3 to 4 months throughout the year, that's all the Treasury receives in taxes. So they've got a 12-month budget just like we do, John. So you got to ask yourself, wait a minute, if their tax revenue that they receive only covers about 3 to 4 months of their budget, where do they get all their money?
Good question.
It's a very good question, and it's interesting. So what happens is, let's say that, and this is why people in Congress, I'm not trying to make political statements here, I'm just saying this is why Congress is so important, and the people up there, and you hear these constant debates about debt, this is where this is coming from. Okay, so let's say Congress, we'll just say, needs $1 billion, John. So they go to the Treasury, you know, they walk down the street to the Treasury and they say, hey, we need $1 billion. And let's say it's the month of May, and the Treasury says, hey, fellas, you rascals just spent everything. We're out of money. You've collected all the taxes. We don't have any money. So what they do then, Congress cannot print money, but they're approved to borrow money. So they go down to the Fed, and let's just call it a bank so we can imagine walking in a big bank building. So now the congressman goes down to the bank and says, we need $1 billion. The Fed says, sure. So the Fed, this is where it gets almost kind of comical, John. The Fed writes a check to Congress, or the Treasury, if you will, okay, for $1 billion. Okay, you with me there? Mm-hmm. So they write a check for $1 billion to the Treasury so Congress can spend that money. Now here's the question, where did that money come from?
Thin air. I have no idea.
No.
Help me.
Yeah, remember, sometimes things that are so complicated are actually very simple. So don't make this too complicated, because the Fed doesn't create anything. It just created this, it's basically accounting, if you want to call it that. It credited $1 billion to the Treasury, okay? And then what's going to happen is the government is going to have to pay that back. So it pays it back. Well, the government doesn't have any money. It already spent it. So where's the government going to get the money? It has to get it through more taxes. And that's why when you hear the deficit is growing, it'd just be like you or I as a consumer, John, if we kept borrowing more and more money and we didn't have the income to pay it back, but somebody kept saying, don't worry about it, John, you can pay me later. Well, the debt plus the interest is going to grow. Now, we can come back to the camera here for a minute. Let me give you my opinion on what's going on here, and I'll continue to walk through this illustration because it's kind of fascinating. This is just the world according to Tony. Again, I don't pretend to be an economist. I've never worked for the Fed. I've tried to study it and read about it. But this is why I think they cannot raise interest rates right now, because so much money is borrowed out. If they started raising interest rates too quickly, overseas, all these people that have loaned us money, they're going to demand higher interest rates. The question is, where are we going to get the income to afford larger interest rates? Again, put it back in your corner. Let's say you have a $100,000 mortgage and it's a variable rate. You with me so far? And the bank calls you up out of the blue and says, hey, you know what? We're going to raise that rate from 3 to 6%. Well, that may sound okay on the surface, but now you got to come up with not 3% or $3,000 on $100,000. You got to come up with $6,000. Well, see, our economy is the same way because we've kept interest rates so low. If they go up, then the government's going to have to figure out where to get even more revenue to make higher interest payments. That's why I think for a period of time, doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but I think they're going to keep interest rates down. Now let's go one more, before we get out of this segment, I'm going to go to one more step on this. Let's go back to the Elmo. All right. So now the government has $1 billion, okay, and they're all excited. Don't forget that it's borrowed. What do? Maybe they pay $100, let's just call it a postal worker, because the postal worker is a government employee. And what do? They take that $100, and guess where they go deposit the money, John? The postal worker takes his $100, takes it right back to the bank, or the banking system, which created the money to begin with out of thin air. Then the bank gets all excited because under the Federal Reserve System, it's called the fractional reserve system. The bank can take that $100 deposit, okay, and they can multiply that by a factor and literally loan out $900 for every $100 deposit. So now they're able to loan out money, and then they collect interest on that money, and we go back again. Where did the money originally come from? So folks, what I'm saying on this is, and we're going to get into annuities in a minute, and we're going to get into the WorryFree Retirement and why our philosophy is so different, and why the financial world, not only is all these shenanigans going on, but why the financial world's really got themselves in a lather over this, and why they're making it difficult on you to enjoy your money. So when we come back in this next segment, we're going to get into the concept of perfecting your walk, the worry-free retirement, and then we're going to close out and move into the show on why annuities, fixed annuities, are such a great tool for savers, John. And we're going to come back. I'm excited to cover this information. It's going to be really good stuff.
Good information, and remember, we're the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers like yourself worry less about their money. We'll be right back on Worry-Free Retirement.
How would you like to find a trusted advisor in your area who practices and preaches the same safe money solutions that I speak of on this program? Well, you can by simply logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and clicking on the Find an Advisor link. Once there, just fill out the confidential profile and submit it. This free service is available to savers who are serious about safeguarding their money. So what are you waiting for? Stop worrying and log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
And now it's time for Tony in the Trenches.
Hey, Tony. I'm putting 10% into my 401k plan. The company matches 6%. And I was wondering, is it advisable to keep putting that much in my 401k plan, or should I think about doing something else with my money?
A lot of 401k questions out there. You know, we've been told for years, put it all in there, load it up. Maybe yes, maybe no. What does Tony Walker say?
Well, you know, I say it all depends. This ties in rather well, too, with the concept of inflation. So hopefully from our last illustration of what the Fed's doing, creating money out of thin air, pumping it back in the economy, what it does is that is a tax, really, any way you want to look at it. So what happens is it's putting pressure on the dollar. We're having less and less money to spend. Certainly a 401k is a great savings tool, John. I'm not going to knock the 401k, but people know I'm very skeptical of things, very cynical of things. I always tell people that they need to be what's called tax diversified. They also need to understand, we talked about this last week, the 4 rules of financial institutions. The financial world loves 401k plans, absolutely loves them, because what happens is they take control of your money. They get it first. Think about the banks, the same thing. The banks get that money first and they start working with it. It's kind of like a spigot. The first one that gets to drink out of the hose gets a lot of water. You know, when we're drinking downstream, we don't get much and wonder why the water tastes funny. But anyway, so they get that money, the financial institutions. They use that money. They invest that money. And then the 401k rules, the laws restrict Joe Lunchbox from really getting access to it. So what I caution people of, first of all, if you get a match, that is pretty good to be getting a match. What I would say is first, contribute up to the match only. If you do not have a retirement specialist or somebody that can look at the whole package, because there's so many other things you could do with the balance of that money. And people say, yeah, but Tony, it's pre-tax. Well, no, that's just a tax tumor. You're just postponing the tax with that money. One day, John, the government's going to come call and they're going to want their money. And who knows at what rate. So I always tell people, up to the match, yes, consider the 401k. Above the match, this gentleman said he's putting in 10%. Be very, very careful. If I were going to do anything, I would get with a retirement specialist like myself. And then we've already mentioned, we'll be talking about this. If there's a retirement specialist in your area, you can go to the website at TonyWalkerFinancial.com. We have advisors in your area. If you're watching outside the Kentucky market, if you're watching from South Central Kentucky, I personally would visit with you at no cost or obligation. These advisors around the country, you just click on Find an Advisor down there. They're in the same boat I'm in, John. They work with people at no cost or obligation. The way I'm compensated, the way they're compensated. If you decided to invest money in our process, they get a commission paid by the companies. But you can use their services, you can use their advice at no charge whatsoever to just meet with them. So yeah, if you have a 401k out there and you're contributing and you wondered if it may be too much and maybe it's not the best use of your money, I would encourage you to get with somebody right away and get a second opinion on that.
Tony, I want to talk a little bit about your philosophy and how it's evolved. It seems to me that a lot of folks are now kind of repeating your message, and they finally got what you've been saying for a long time. I mean, you wrote this initial book just after 9/11. This book, Perfecting Your Walk in Retirement, there it is right there, just after 9/11. Now I hear a lot of people almost, I mean, they're really all repeating, imitating your process. I want to talk about how you came about, because you've been doing this for a long, long time. You don't claim to be a soothsayer or an economist, but with that being said, this has been right on the money. It even evolved into really another book or another title. It's pretty much the same book, is it not?
Yeah, and if we can put that book cover up there, I've reason I want to say that I want to give accolades to my wife, Susan. This is kind of funny. We went to a local area there where I'm located out of Bowling Green, Kentucky. And that's my wife walking down there. Yeah, isn't that a beautiful picture? But I want you to think about the picture there, see? And I know I stole this quote. I can't remember who said it, but, you know, sometimes the journey itself is just as important and as enjoyable as the destination. And the concept was very biblical, John, in that we are to walk out this life. This is not a 50-yard dash. It's not even a marathon. I think it's a walk. It should be an enjoyable walk. And the problem is, okay, thank you. The problem is there's a story that goes along with this too. The problem is people in the financial world want to disrupt that walk. They want to, you know, when you're going about things at a leisurely pace, you ever notice that there's always somebody out there wanting to rob your joy? Have you ever experienced that? You're having a good day, and sure enough, if you go long enough and you're around enough people, somebody try to screw it up. That's just, so the financial world, they don't want you to enjoy the money. They don't want you to enjoy the walk. And I want to tell a story about this. This is what's interesting. There's a story of three people, and we'll name them fact, faith, and experience. So they were walking on a very tall wall. Have you ever walked across the top of a wall, like a retaining wall when you're a kid? Well, fact knew that fact wasn't going to fall off, so fact just kept walking. And then faith followed closely behind because faith knew the facts. The problem is experience was dogging faith. And experience kept telling faith, well, remember this, remember that, remember who else fell, oop, look out, there's some high winds. And before you knew it, you know what faith did? He took his eyes off the fact. And then he and his experiences eventually went tumbling down the wall. So everything about the Worry-Free Retirement, everything about perfecting your walk is all based on biblical principles that I've learned to grow upon. And when I'm working with savers, what I tell savers is you have to know the facts. That's why I did the 3 personalities of money, John. You have to know who you are. Who you are and the facts is what you put faith in. But what happens is the financial world always comes around with other experiences, or they show you what somebody else is doing. Right now, folks, this is happening. We're just talking about the Fed. The stock market right now, in my opinion, is being pumped up by the Fed. All you got to do is go back to 07. 07, you know. But, man, I had a lot of savers, John. They were coming to me, well, Tony, don't you think we ought to move more money in the market? What were they looking at? Everybody else was making a lot of money.
And there's a lot of people talking about it, too.
That's right.
And really worry them and have them think, well, I'm not doing the right thing. You're saying, basically, keep faith in the facts.
That's right. And the facts are you cannot handle a 30 or 40% loss in the market. Your personality. I know these savers. I know them well. That's why my granddad never did. But people were more intuitive back then, my granddad's day. He just stayed away from stocks. He knew that, yeah, they could go up, but what if they went down, see? So if you're a saver out there and you feel like, well, gosh, now the market's back up. Here we are in 2013. You need to remember you probably had those same things you were thinking about in 2007, and look what happened. Now, I don't know when the market will go down, but it will go down again. It always has. Generally, it seems to about every 7 years. You can go back to 84, and 87 and 94 and 01 and 08. You know, so I don't know when, but I'm just saying for savers, you got to keep your eye on the ball. Quit watching the experience and have faith in the facts. In the first place you start, first of all, you have faith in the Lord. That's where you really have to start. But secondly, you have faith in who you are. Then find advisors that are trying to find products that fit who you are. Coming back this third segment, John, I'm going to get back into annuities a little bit and help people understand why these fixed annuities out there for savers are such wonderful tools. You're going to want to stay around because I am going to provide you ammunition to go out here and attack the world and enjoy your money. I'm not going to leave you hanging on the wall, or worse yet, have you fall off with your experiences.
See, I love that part of the process, enjoying your money. We'll talk about that coming up here. Again, this is the Worry-Free Retirement, the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers like you worry less about their money. We'll be right back.
For nearly 30 years, I've made it my life's work to help savers worry less about money. And now I invite you to personally contact me to discuss your situation to see if I can help you. It's very easy. You just log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and click on the Meet with Tony link. Or, if you like, you can attend one of my free financial workshops. As always, there's never any cost or obligation to meet and discuss your situation in private. So what are you waiting for? Log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
And now it's time for Tony in the Trenches.
Yeah, hey Tony, I was wondering if we've got this annuity set up and we're reasonably comfortable with the amount that we seem to be guaranteed from that. But going down the road, what's inflation going to do to us? And if we have to have a new car, a new roof, some major expense as things go on, that we haven't factored into our monthly budget, where's that money going to come from?
Before we went to break, you promised we would talk about annuities, and we're going to do that and answer that gentleman's question. But before we do that, Tony, I want to look at a few quotes from your book, Perfecting Your Walk in Retirement, which evolved into WorryFree Retirement.
Yeah, I want to make sure, if you go on Amazon, folks, you'll see the Perfecting Your Walk book and the WorryFree Retirement book. Don't get mad if you order both of them because they're the same things. They'll say, well, that guy hoodwinked me, you know.
Why'd you change the title?
Well, it was funny. Perfecting Your Walk, I had a national webinar, and it was the most confusing thing in the world. I had people call in and think it was about exercise. So it was a biblical reference on my point, but I changed it to try to make it more understandable to retirement. So it's really the same book. So the new book is the old book, but it's called the WorryFree Retirement. If they go and order that on Amazon or can go to our website. But yeah, it basically, the Perfecting Your Walk, I started working on it after 9/11. So I drug a few quotes out. I know you've got them. We can just show a few people of things I was talking about back then. This was on one of the pages, and again, John, I started this after 9/11. You know the problems we're having with Social Security, right?
Right.
Okay, look at what this quote says in the book. In order for Social Security system to remain solvent, taxes in-go must be increased or benefits out-go must be reduced. Now, if the Fed keeps pumping money and we got to use more and more taxes to cover interest, do you think we got plenty of taxes to cover Social Security if we have a shortfall?
No.
So what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to cut benefits. So I said it back then. Now I'm predicting benefits will have to be reduced drastically over time with Social Security. Let's go to another quote I wrote. Today, a retirement age of 65 may not be realistic. Granddad had guaranteed Social Security and pension checks. What will you have? Guess what the financial world is now saying? Oops, folks, a little off on our predictions. You're going to have to work longer now. Okay, I saw that coming.
They keep pushing it back.
Yeah, they keep pushing it back. And then finally, I think we've got one more here. We can go over these. Okay, this was a biggie. You got to remember, back after 9/11, people were still talking about 10% returns. I heard a fellow on the radio that's still talking about 10% returns as if this is. Back then, I was saying, please don't use anything more than 5%. You know what? That's probably even a tad high. But okay, thank you. So all it is, I'm just saying that being in the trenches and doing this for so long, I think has helped me cut through the noise. I know the facts very well for savers, and I'm just out there trying to look out for them. That's what these books are all about, trying to keep them focused on things that actually work. Now, in reference to that gentleman's question, we'll go to annuities in a second. A retirement specialist is able to try to minimize taxes, minimize insurance premiums, minimize interest. Cannot do anything about inflation. I want to show you a couple graphics here, though, John. We covered this last week. If we're ready in here, the difference between our message and Wall Street. You got to remember, the financial world has three positions. They want you to save money, they want you to keep saving, and then finally, when you get into that second half of life this gentleman's talking about, when you get into those senior years, what I believe, folks, is you're not going to have to save as much. You should be able to use more because you'll spend less. Even though inflation is chopping away at your money, you're going to spend less money. I've seen that. So as you get older, don't fear. The WorryFree Retirement's philosophy is so much different. It says to save in the first half, start enjoying at halftime when you can, and then as you get into those later years, yeah, that's the first half. You can see that, and it continues to save more. If you go to the next graphic, the WorryFree Retirement cuts to the chase. Notice how the blue, which represents an average person's net worth, as you get older, even though it goes down, that's okay. Let me go over to the Elmo and show you something here, John, on the annuities. This is what a lot of my folks are seeing out here. You're seeing these ads in the some of the journals out here. Here's one I saw recently. Okay, annuity payout rate 5%. Okay, problem with that is that's an immediate annuity, John. People have come to me and they say, hey, partner, I like that idea. I'll put $100,000 with this insurance company and I'll get $5,500 a year. You've got to go over here and look at what they're doing. This is an immediate annuity. May have a refund option, may not. Very, very restrictive tool. Should you do it? Should you not? Don't know. That's why you need to meet with somebody like myself or one of our advisors around the country that understands annuities. Do you have an income plan, John? See, an annuity person, a retirement specialist, should be showing you things like this. Here's where we've taken someone, John, and we've laid out the annuities, and see how we've staggered this income out? See how the money's coming out at different points? These are called laddering. So there's a lot of annuity things you can do here. So, John, what I would recommend, thank you. So what I would recommend that people do that are looking at annuities or have a question like this one gentleman, you have to get with somebody like me that actually works with these products. Since 9/11, when I saw that we needed more fact than fiction, we needed that guaranteed stream, that income that annuities can provide, we've written over 1,500 fixed, not variable, fixed annuities, and our clients are worry-free because they know that income's going to be there for the rest of their life. Is it going to spend some of the principal? Well, sure, but that's okay. That's what the money's for. So again, I would encourage people out there, if you want somebody to give you a second opinion on an annuity, even if you have an existing annuity, it's a good time to look at them. A lot of these new hybrid annuities are a lot better than the old annuities. I would encourage you to go to our website. You just simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. As we said, you can click on Find an Advisor down there. And John, what we're going to do too, in addition to that, I don't want to jump ahead here, but the essence of time, I want to make sure to get this out here. I've written a book called The 10 Biggest Misconceptions of Annuities. For the first 10 people that go to the website, there's the book. It's a great book written in layman's terms, but if they go to the website, click on Contact Tony, tell me they want the 10 books, 10 Biggest Misconceptions of Annuities, the first 10 people in each market that contact us will get a copy of that free book at no charge. Okay?
All right. So many reasons to go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. We'll be right back on the Worry-Free Retirement.
How would you like to find a trusted advisor in your area who practices and preaches the same safe money solutions that I speak of on this program? Well, you can by simply logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com and clicking on the Find an Advisor link. Once there, just fill out the confidential profile and submit it. This free service is available to savers who are serious about safeguarding their money. So what are you waiting for? Stop worrying and log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
So many reasons to go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. If you've been watching this show and you find yourself, you say, I am a saver, then go to TonyWalkerFinancial.com, click on Find an Advisor, and he can help you out. Also, if you go to the first 10 people who do, hey, contact Tony, put your name and address, and they'll send you a copy of a free book. We'll see you every Monday right here, the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about their money. See you next time.
You've been watching the Worry-Free Retirement with financial advisor Tony Walker. To ask Tony a question or to find an advisor in your area, log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.